In a previous video, I talked about divine essence, the whatness of God. And I said that if there's an attribute apart from which he is not God, like he has this thing, and then if he has this attribute, then he's not God, then that's how you can start to see what is truly of God. Now, in that video, I used the example of omniscience, all-knowing. And that is one of the attributes in a previous discussion I talked about, is one of the incommunicable attributes of the divine nature, of the divine essence. It cannot be communicated to something that is not God. Only God has that attribute, and nothing that is not God can have that attribute. But let's talk about a couple of attributes of God that is of his essence, but it can actually be communicated to something that is not God, and that is so of his communicable attributes. So the one I want to talk about is God's justice. God is just, or God is purely righteous. So if God is just and God is righteous, is he just kind of that way, or is he a lot that way? No, he's infinitely that way. He's perfectly that way. He's absolutely to the maximum, infinite level of the righteousness that there can be. There's a perfect, pure, maximum righteousness. Okay, that's God. The infinite righteousness, whatever infinite righteousness is, it is God. It is of God. That's what God is. Okay, that's of his whatness. Okay, but let's pick a different one. Can God be, according to the Bible anyway, can God be actually God if he's not righteous? That's interesting. It's an interesting question. And see, what the Bible teaches is if God isn't actually truly righteous, that's one of the, apart from which he is not God. That's part of the essential attributes of the divine essence. And so this just comes up in the Bible in so many different ways. And righteousness, justice, the justness of God, it's just all throughout the Bible. But just one example in Genesis chapter 18, there's actually this incredible discussion. And a lot of people talk about how God destroys Sodom, but a lot of people don't talk about this. Before God destroys Sodom, there's actually a profound conversation that Abraham has with God, and it goes like this. So Abraham drew near and said, will you indeed? So he finds out this news that God is going to destroy Sodom. He's actually concerned because his nephew Lot and his nephew's family lives in that city. And God is destroyed. It's such a wicked city, he's just going to just sweep it and destroy all the way. And Abraham asked this question. Abraham drew near and said, will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be that from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? See, there we go. So even Abraham knows that if you are truly God, you're the judge of the earth, how you have to be utterly righteous and be just. And so, ultimately, by the way, God does save Lot and his family. Lot's wife doesn't make it. And then the story actually gets really, really interesting. Later on, you get to find out that Lot's family is actually really not very just at all and not very righteous. There's some really gross and horrible stuff that happens later, which I won't get into. And it gives you kind of a window into Lot and his family, that they really weren't righteous at all. And that probably, if God wanted to, there's a bit of a counterfactual. If God wanted to, he could have just destroyed them along with everybody else in Sodom too, and God would have been utterly just. But my understanding, the way I read the Bible, is it's not because Lot and his family were just that God rescued them. It's because essentially God knew that Abraham was interceding for Lot and his family, so he had mercy on them, even though they were not righteous and just. But anyway, this is one just among many, many places in the Bible that apart from which, if he is not just and righteous, he's not God. Now, let me point out a few other things. There's only, again, in so many other places in and all the other gods of the world and different gods that have been. So, let's go back to the Greek gods again. Zeus. We already said that Zeus does not have the attribute of omniscience. He doesn't, even though he's the king of the Greek pantheon. and he's the most powerful, but he's not all powerful, and he's certainly not all knowing, right? Is he righteous? And often he is not. And so there are many other gods and so many other attributes of they say this God or that God, but the God of the Bible, apart from which he is just, he cannot be God. He is not God. Now let me point to another attribute which is also communicable, which the Bible also says, which is that God is love. That's famous. It's famous. It's taught in the book of 1 John that God is love, and that God is truly loving, that God is merciful, he's compassionate, and all these things, that he has deep love, like a father to his children, like a bridegroom to his bride. That's the way God describes his relationship to his people. But here I want to offer this question. If God is love, he is infinitely loving. He's infinite love itself. He is love. So the Bible could even say he is love itself. And he is purity of love. But one of the things that a lot of people don't seem to underestimate and don't understand is that if there is a being, he is infinite righteousness and he is infinite love, and he is infinitely so both in the same being of the same being of this one God. Then what happens if he creates a being whom he loves, but then who becomes wicked? See, that's a lot of times people look at the Bible and they just go, well, that's really interesting. The Bible tells us about God and heaven and hell and what's right and wrong and all this other kind of stuff. And we always think that what's interesting is what's useful for me. What is it, like what I need to know about me? But really the central revelation, what it reveals the truth about the Bible is who is God? What is God? God is always the central fundamental content of the Bible. And so we look at, we see these characters, Abraham, David, whoever, all these characters, and then some did good, some did bad, so forth, and we're interested in that. And then there's even wisdom about, there's wisdom, this is foolish. And today, in the 21st, we may or may not be interested in that, because it's practical, it's useful for me, but the actual central substance of the Bible that the Bible is trying to get at is who is God, what is God? And actually, the fundamental, dilemma in the Bible is not the dilemma of human beings, it is the dilemma of God. That God made a creation, he made a set of persons that were made in the personhood of himself, and then he loved them, and then they were intended to have something, they were made to be in his image, in other words, have of the communicable attributes. They were supposed to be, just to take two things, human beings are supposed to be both righteous and loving. But very often we are neither righteous nor loving. In fact, we're very wicked, and our love is very, very phony, and we use other people even though we say that we love them. And oftentimes we even use, I love you, but it's not even real love. It's really more like a feeling of love, and we think it's love, but it's actually a lie. It's actually not even love. It's actually using. And so what if human beings are like that? And if God is maximally, infinitely righteous and infinitely loving, if God is truly righteous, all that is righteous must oppose and defeat that which is wicked. So let's just take an example. What if you have a father and he has a son? So let's not talk about God and, his beings whom he loves. Let's talk about a father and he has a son. And his son, let's just say, is a rapist. And he likes to rape women. Let's just say that. But the father loves his son. If the father truly loves his son, shouldn't he stop him from being unrighteous, of course? And if he's truly righteous, he must oppose the raping of his son. He must stop that. Now, if he doesn't stop it, maybe you could still say he still loves his son, but his righteousness will fail. If he continues to just allow his son to be raping and doesn't stop it, you'd have to say, he's not righteous. His justice has failed. The father, his justice has failed. But maybe you can even still say in some way he still has compassion, still wants good for his son. He still loves his son. But then his righteousness will fail. But what if he says, you know what? I'm going to be truly righteous and you're going to get what you deserve, and maybe what you deserve to be locked up for the rest of your life and to be separated from all people. And then would in some sense his love, what if he says, I'm going to be just? Maybe in our society, in ancient Israel, rape would, incur the death penalty. You're going to be killed. And so I stand with all those who say you must die. Well, then in a sense, the love doesn't get to come to its fulfillment and its fruition. In a sense, the love fails. But that is just humans, human beings. A human father to a human son. But God is infinitely just and infinitely righteous. And if we are wicked, God condemns us, and not just condemns, He condemns us with eternal condemnation, eternal damnation and separation from Him. So those whom He loves, He now has this problem. And the central dilemma of the Bible is not fundamentally the question of whether human beings will, we can have a nice life or not. Actually, we don't even know how to handle true love with true justice. We don't really know how to do that. Do you know how to do that? I don't know how to do that. And even if we thought we knew how to do that, could we actually do it? We're bad in loving and we're bad in righteousness. Do we know? And then all throughout human history, all cultures, they kind of fall down. There are like soft cultures that allow the wickedness to run rampant, but we say we love them. That's kind of like our culture. And then there are kind of harsh cultures that are tough on the standards of righteousness, but they can be harsh and very judging and judgmental. Our culture doesn't tend to be that way. But this isn't just a dilemma of human beings. It is the dilemma of us made in the image of God, that we can't help but want both. And really, it is the fundamental dilemma of God. And the Bible reveals that God must be both in His divine essence. And the drama of the Bible, the fundamental narrative, or we call it the grand narrative, the meta-narrative of the Bible, is how God solves this problem in His divine essence and His divine wisdom.